I'm holding two Razer Core eGPU enclosures. Unfortunately, I've owned every version since 2016. When I saw these come out, I thought they would be amazing. I had been looking at PCI Express technologies for a while. I had a lot of personal ideas about things that could be accomplished with the spec that I just wasn't seeing in everyday use of PCI Express. So when I saw these eGPU enclosures came out, I jumped on the bandwagon hard. I bought the first Razer Core V1 and I went off to the races. In my mind, I was thinking this should last 8 to 12 years, which should be 2 to 3 laptops, 2 to 3 GPUs, without having to replace them at the same time. So swap the laptop separately then at the time you swap the GPU. And that would be awesome. Unfortunately, I've now owned 3 enclosures, 1 laptop, and 2 GPUs. Eek, that was not what I was anticipating. So I'll let you know about the good and the bad, and especially the ugly of being an eGPU early adopter. So how did I end up with every version of the Razer Core? Well, it starts with the Razer Core V1. So as I mentioned before, I was extremely excited about this technology. So I brought it as soon as it came out. Pre-ordered it and everything. I was so excited about it. I got it shipped to my job, opened it up, bragged about it. This is the next wave, eGPU. Figured I was gonna run into some early adopter issues, but I didn't really realize all the things I was gonna run into. So first was driver support, just software and driver support. So what does that mean? Laptops at that time, and the software, whether it's Windows or any other operating system, but in this context, Windows in particular, Windows was good at supporting 2 GPUs for your laptop. So think of one for your main CPU. In this case, the laptop was using an Intel CPU, and think another one for any discrete GPU if it existed in your laptop. So in this case, I had a laptop with a discrete Nvidia GPU and an internal Intel GPU. And so switching between 2 at this time in 2016 is not a big problem. However, when you plug in the eGPU, that interjects a 3rd GPU, and that's where you started to run into issues. Having the operating system dynamically know which GPU it's supposed to be using at one time. So what Razer did at the time is they shipped a product or a piece of software called the Razer Core Switcher GPU, and you had to declare, did I want the internal discrete to be on, the external discrete to be on, and you're supposed to be hot swappable at this time. It didn't work that way. So that means every time you unplug the USB-C, you better turn on the Razer Core, the Razer Switcher, switch it to the internal, then unplug, plug it back in, switch it, and never unplug it while it's pointing at the wrong thing, or you will reboot your computer. Annoying, because it's supposed to be hot swappable. It was advertised as hot swappable. But either way, you'd think that was the worst problem, just the usability experience, but it wasn't. Oh, let's talk about the other usability problem. When I was hoping for a single cable to rule them all, and technically it supported being a single cable to rule them all. However, Razer shipped their Razer Blade laptop with dedicated power and a separate port. And I believe the Razer Core V1 was somewhere around 60 watt output, so they didn't think that it would be enough power to power that laptop, specifically I guess when you're doing high workload activities like gaming or content creating. The only thing that I really questioned about that was when you plug in the eGPU, you disconnect the discrete GPU that's inside the laptop. Well, at that time you could choose, so you could choose to turn on the internal graphics card, or you could turn on the external one, and that's probably where the confusion happened in their internal team, is that you could use the internal GPU at that time. Nowadays, the software automatically disconnects the internal one. There's no special software. You only get one discrete at a time, so it puts the computer logic back into just either the internal GPU or the discrete GPU, versus one of 2 discrete GPUs that was causing the software a lot of confusion and a lot of crashing of Thunderbolt and etc. But nevertheless, once you shut down the most power consuming component of the laptop, the next most power consuming component is the CPU. And I suspect the power budget for 60 watts in most use cases, maybe outside of light gaming and content creating, would be good enough. It'd have been nice to have the option for the two. So either way, so now we've got weird software. We're not at one cable to rule them all. And to make the one cable to rule them all problem worse, we have I/O issues. So when I say I/O, I'm talking about input and output devices. So on the Razer Core V1, it had 4 USB ports and a gigabit Ethernet port. So that's the I/O that I'm talking about. Well, it turns out the original design was flawed, and if you were using the GPU as well as using those ports all at the same time, I guess you'd run into congestion, getting traffic to the PCI Express bus or having enough bandwidth. I think it might have just had to be congestion with it being able to write to the bus. The best way that I understand it is this chipset would have to switch back and forth between taking information from the GPU and taking it from these I/O devices. And in that process of going back and forth between listening to these different sort of brokering access to the PCI Express bus, if two things wanted to write at the exact same time, typically the I/O devices would lose. So that means all of a sudden your mouse would stop working. All of a sudden your network would cut out. And I wanted to be an early adopter so bad, I decided I would live with this. I would figure out how to have yet another cable to plug a USB hub, but I hated it. Like that, I hated that part more than anything else. And so I had been still tracking the eGPU stuff. While you're running with your GPU and no I/O in the back, very stable, worked great for games, etc. Then I saw the Razer 2 come out and the Razer V1 was no longer available on Razer's website. What's going on here? So I start digging, doing some research, and come to find out I see some messaging around this chipset problem. So from what I understand, they released now 2 separate chipsets. One chipset dedicated to the GPU and another chipset dedicated to the I/O. Now, no two things have to worry about switching the context of the chipset. So both things can write to the PCI Express bus at the same time, because I don't think it was a bandwidth problem. I think it was an attention problem. What is the chipset paying attention to? Now that you have 2 separate chipsets, they both can get access to the PCI Express bus at the same time, so they both can write to it. And that apparently resolves the problem. Well, here's the problem. I think the warranty is not, I don't remember how long the warranty was, but I remember this was out of warranty. I was over a year after owning the Core. And when I saw this, I was like, oh no, I'm calling them. So since I was an early adopter, I ended up buying my Razer Core V1 directly from Razer. So I called them, I got on support. They were like, your product's out of warranty. And I was like, wait, this thing, half the thing I bought this thing for, it's useless. I have to use wireless. I can't even use my gigabit Ethernet port. That's crazy. And now I see you guys have come out with a Razer Core V2. I want this eGPU, but I don't want V1. They initially gave me a hard time. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. You're out of warranty. And I said, look, this thing is useless. It wasn't useless, but it was useless to me at the point, to make my argument. And so they took it back. They gave me store credit, and they RMA'd. So they gave me return merchandise authorization so I could ship back the other one. And then I bought the new Razer Core, and I was happy. I/O works now. I can leave everything plug in. I'm back to just 2 cables, power and Thunderbolt. Next thing I know, Microsoft updates the drivers. The Razer Core switcher software is no longer needed. You can actually plug in, remove, and plug back in Thunderbolt, and that actually works now. Wow, like I'm in nirvana. Fast forward to 2021, and I decide that I'm gonna get a 37 GPU. nobody wants to be the prosumer who researches hours at a time before you buy something every time. Sometimes you just want to go to Amazon, hit one click ship, or do whatever, like, you think it's gonna work, you want to make some assumptions. I'll say, yeah, it bites you in the butt sometimes. So I bought the 3070. I'm excited about it, and I'm thinking this is gonna be great. I'll buy the 3070. I'll swap it out in my eGPU Razer Core V2, which was designed to just be able to buy a new GPU and swap it in. I'm thinking 3090, I don't want to spend that much money, and I know it's going to be too big. 3080, probably too big, but it might fit, and probably too much money. 3070, we're getting closer to the Goldilocks range. Okay, I'll buy that. And I'm at a 3070, so that's a upper mid level GPU. It should just fit, right? It should just fit, right? It should just fit, right? I bought this Razer Core so I can put new GPU in it, so it should just fit, right? Oh wow, I was wondering why Razer came out with the Razer Core, what is it, the Razer Core X, Razer Core X Chroma, the giant looking thing that supports 3 wide GPUs and super long ones. Oh, this is the reason why. So I buy a Core in 2016, and by the time I finally get to the point where I can put a new GPU in, it's too big. So this idea, what did I say earlier in the video? I was imagining that I would have one core, 2 to 3 GPUs, 2 to 3 laptops, swap them out of sync. And that would last me 8 to 12 years. That's what I was hoping for. Instead, one laptop. Haven't switched my laptop yet. I'm using the same computer. 3 eGPU enclosures. 3. I'm on the 3rd version. I've owned every version. And 2 GPUs. As much as I like it, this is not the ideal scenario. And mind you, the V2 is awesome. It keeps the eGPU very cool. That aluminum closure, nice airflow, hot plug and play, I/O. But the dream of being a single plug that you can actually update the GPU, it just hasn't been true. If we think about this experience, it's not all bad. The software got better, caught up to the technology. The user experience of being able to plug and play, the stability, the performance of feeling like you get a full desktop experience, it does that. But the dream of being a single cable, that's almost there. Razer's the only one that killed that. Other computers support it. You could sit down, plug in. Most of the time they'll charge. All of them actually. I've never plugged anything into it that didn't charge. But the idea that the enclosure would last, right? It would last long enough for you to do multiple GPUs. It hasn't been true. Matter of fact, the enclosure itself hasn't lasted. It hasn't lasted 4.5 years, and I'm on the 3rd enclosure. I got the 2nd version for free, so luckily I didn't have to pay the upgrade cost. But if I had to buy one for each version, potentially that's short-sighted, design on Razer's part. The first version didn't think about the I/O contention, the everything racing to try to get on the I/O bus, or the PCI Express bus in this case. So that was a problem. The 2nd version, not thinking about cards getting bigger and supporting the biggest cards. When it came out, it didn't support the biggest cards at the time. And so Nvidia decided to make cards bigger. Maybe shame on Nvidia for making a mid-tier card now 3 slots wide. But at the end of the day, that short sight meant that the usability of the product has gone down. So now we're at the Razer Chroma X, or the Razer Core X, the Chroma and the non-Chroma version. The non-Chroma version is ironic to me because it's essentially the Razer Core V1. By the way, if you're looking at maybe buying a used Razer Core V1, it's nice, it works well. Recognize that size of the card is going to be an issue. Potentially power output's going to be an issue because each version of the Razer Core puts out additional power. But those ports are useless. So if you look at the Razer Core X, it has no ports on the back. It has no I/O. So it is essentially, to me, a wide, deep version of the V1. The Razer Core X Chroma is essentially the Razer Core V2, but now wider and with a bigger power supply. So here I am, Razer Core X Chroma, but now we have another problem. That PCI Express Gen 2. The Thunderbolt 3 spec only supports PCI Express Gen 3. The latest 3070 card is PCI Express Gen 4. Is that a problem? Maybe not. You know, right now we're not even using all of the lanes capable on PCI Express, right? So that card has a by 16, so 16 lanes of PCI Express. However, you only get 4 lanes of PCI Express with Thunderbolt 3. So you're only getting 1/4 of the card's bandwidth capabilities. So bandwidth, we're saying, is not really the issue. It's the card's ability to perform. And so having a more performant card is the most important part here. Being able to send those workloads and get back to the higher performance. But we're just knowing that we're unable to take advantage of that new specification no matter what. The core is limited. And guess what? For the core to support that, you need another version. Not only another version of the core, another version of the Thunderbolt spec. Wow. So it being able to last 8 to 12 years, questionable. Very questionable. There's already questions for the Core X. Either way, it's a great product. I'm still a sucker because now I have the Core X Chroma. It's a mouthful. But now I have the Razer Core X Chroma, and I'll enjoy it. And hopefully it can actually manage to fit the next GPU in there that might exist 4 years from now. I'm not holding my breath. With that, you've got my experience as an early adopter for eGPU technology. Great concept. They've worked out the usability experience, but the lifelong, or the how long the product really is supposed to last, it just didn't shape up. If you like what you saw here today, press the like button, subscribe. Please enter in the comments below. Curious Tech out.